Welcome to another episode of the Immigrant Education Collaborative Podcast. Today I have a very special episode. I'm super excited about this episode. This episode, we're calling it the Vincy Mom Roundtable. And I have three Vincy moms or three Vincentian moms. And if you're wondering why I'm here, it's because my mom is a Vincy mom, right? So I'm from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, so my mom is a Vincentian. And these three lovely ladies are also born and raised in St. Vincent. Um, so welcome, ladies.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, so we have Michelle Ford, we have Corinne, we have Kaylon, and me,
Hi.
represented from my mom. So, ladies, let's get it started. So, we're going to have this conversation around the American education system. All three of you went to high school in St. Vincent, but all three of you have raised children in America through the K through 12 system. And Michelle still has a child in the system. So, we want to have a conversation around sort of the differences in your experience growing up in the education system in St. Vincent versus your experience parenting in the American education system.
So my experience is, I have to tell you, it's totally different. One of the things that I've noticed, and I'm gonna jump right in, is the way they do math here. I helped my daughter when she was actually started back in elementary school. And these kids, the way they are, it's the way my teacher says it, or it's wrong. And they took them all around the world to get one answer. And I would show her a simpler way to do it. And she's like, Mom, I can't do it that way. That is not the way the teacher told me to do it. It is incorrect.
Mm.
So I've always learned to work smart, not hard. And I feel like in the Caribbean, in St. Vincent, they teach us to work smart. But here in America, they teach them to work hard and not smart.
Okay, that's a great
And
point.
as it turns out, my daughter actually turned out to be a math major in college now. Go figure.
Right. Irony.
Yes.
Michelle, how about you?
Well, for me, I'm still in the trenches, as I said earlier when we were getting teed up for the call. I'm still in the trenches. My daughter is a 10th grader. Um, so my experience, the difference that I have seen is that similar to what Kilon mentioned, is that the way that they're teaching the kids here, I don't think is beneficial for them to be able to have critical thinking skills. That's what I think so far, anyhow. I think we were given in the Caribbean, we were more, although it was kind of a stricter environment, I think that they try to build up critical thinking skills. And I don't think that that is something that I see or what I've seen from my experience so far with my daughter.
That's a great takeaway. Corinne?
There's a big cultural difference. I mean, they may see it as more resources, and okay, indeed, it might be more resources. But I remember one specific experience when my first daughter had entered elementary school, and the teacher advised her dad that she needed speech therapy because she says things like water. And I actually got irate
Mm.
about it and never allowed them to give her speech therapy because why place a label on a child label on a child for pronouncing a T in a word where not, where there's a T. So, stuff like that. So there's a cultural difference and a blind spot where the education system here, as much as it may try or tries to try, does not recognize the difference between students that are culturally of this environment and culturally not. And a
Mm.
lot of students are not, more than they realize.
Hmm.
Um, to address what Kilon and Michelle just mentioned regarding how math is taught, coming from a classroom environment, what they try to do from what I see is to give students every different opportunity to solve a problem. Whereas we were taught in a more linear direction.
Mhm.
I think
I
what it
can.
is that a lot of students don't always learn in that linear manner. Some
Mhm.
students have to get a roundabout way. So they try to at least give every student an opportunity in a different way to solve a problem. So You may solve it in a concrete manner, in an abstract manner, or using manipulatives. But we in the Caribbean were taught very abstract math. And a kid who is not necessarily at the top of their game academically can't really figure out abstract math. Simply saying 3 times 4 does not make sense to many kids. You know, they have that dyslexia that applies to numbers, and I think that's what a lot of us who fail at math growing up at home did not have the opportunity to overcome because we only saw it from a linear perspective.
So I have something to say about that, Corinne. Do you think the education system up here and what you just mentioned about how they have different options, they're taught different ways to solve problems. Do you think that kind of creates a bit of confusion for some children?
It can, because it created confusion for me as an adult.
Yeah.
You understand? So learning to teach math was a problem for me because I understand that you're supposed to teach 3 times 4 is 12. Not how does 3 look? How does 4 look? How do you, I didn't get that. Still till today, I cannot draw a diagram unless it's now I can, but at the beginning, I shouldn't say still till today. It was difficult for me to lay that out visually. A lot of the kids here are visual, not a lot of the kids. Some kids are visual learners, so they try to address that. And some are learners by touch, tactile learners. So they try to address those learners, whereas I'm straight abstract. But that maybe, it doesn't necessarily confuse a kid who can see it abstractly from the beginning.
Right.
But it can confuse a kid who's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But to jump in here again, where that is concerned, we did learn it in a linear way. That is true. However, they allowed us opportunities to solve these problems differently as long as we got to the correct answer. Here in America, what they do is you have to do it their way.
That's another thing I have an issue with.
The kids have to do it their way.
That's true.
If they do not do it their way, it's incorrect. And I don't like that, because what you're telling the kids, what you're teaching the kids is that there is one way to do this, when in reality, it's not so.
From hearing your responses from all 3 of you, right? What I'm hearing is there's a great opportunity here, especially for parents to navigate sort of like cultural differences in terms of, learning styles, in terms of education styles, especially from 2 different countries, right? But it has me thinking about advocacy. So as the 3 of you went through these issues based on how you were educated and how you're seeing your kids being educated here, what sort of advocacy did you put forth? How did you sort of reconcile these challenges, right? So Corinne, you spoke about being irate when they offered speech therapy to your daughter. Like, how did you go about navigating that situation, right? So you're furious. So once you calm down, like, how do you go about, because these are, this is like a cultural shock to have someone kind of come out and say, hey, your child has a deficiency or a problem. You know what I mean? It maybe that's how you interpret it. How do you, let's talk about the advocacy piece. How do you go about addressing these things that may be problems to you initially?
Initially, when they were in elementary school, in cases like that, I would simply refuse. I don't think she needs speech therapy, and I'm not signing up for it. But there are parents who are not necessarily as informed, who jump at the opportunity to say, well, okay, yes, she probably needs it, or he probably needs it. I did a lot of advocacy for them as they navigated elementary school and for a little bit in middle school. But in my advocacy, I attempted to teach them how to advocate for themselves, how to stand up for themselves, how to speak to teachers, how to email teachers if it was necessary, how to process information, and how to navigate their system for themselves. Because in the long run, I'm not always going to be there. Right. And they have the opportunity, in my opinion, you have the opportunity to address your issues on your own. And I can't always do it for you effectively. You would probably know better what you need than I would. But definitely from an elementary school standpoint perspective, I did do a lot of that. I was at every parent-teachers meeting. I contributed to the discussions about how the children should be taught. Certain things I agreed with, I stated I agreed with. Certain things I didn't agree with, I didn't agree with, and I didn't go along with it. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
in terms of even the simple stuff like how they would teach them to do stuff in a specific way, I think especially my first daughter would have escaped that little that caveat of the education system because it has since changed.
Mm-hmm.
It changed
Yeah.
during the time when she was in probably middle school.
Mm-hmm.
So she was able to not necessarily say, okay, my teacher said it's this way, so it's this way. She probably had a little more leeway in terms of how she could approach problems, not necessarily just math, but generally education.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there was definitely a lot of, pushing back
Mm-hmm.
and knowing what to accept and knowing what to push back against.
Yeah. So I love your response. I'm going to come to the others, and I think what's really crucial here, what you just said there in terms of advocacy, right? And being involved in the school, parent-teacher conferences, being there, volunteering, and making sure that your presence is felt and known. As Michelle, as you and Kaylon answer the same question that I asked Corinne about how you went through advocacy, also talk about the differences, right? The way that we went to school,
Right,
and our parents' involvement in school in St. Vincent, right? And how
right.
that's different from kind of how you guys have parented, right? How
Mhm.
we all have parented in America.
I would say it is remarkably different. Okay, the experience between how my parents were involved or not in my education, on the day-to-day of my education in St. Vincent, as
Hmm.
opposed to how heavily involved I am now and trying to do the same same things that Corinne spoke about, giving my daughter the tools to advocate for herself at this point in her educational career.
Hmm.
In St. Vincent, I don't remember, and I have a very bad memory. Corinne will tell you this, but I literally do not remember one time that my father definitely did not. I could tell you that right away. He was not involved, but in my education, anything with education. My mom, I don't remember her ever going. My older sister, on the other hand, was the representative. So anything that had to, if she had to go to the school, which was kind of rare because I kind of stayed out of trouble a lot in terms of getting in trouble at school. So she didn't have to go too much on that, except for talking a lot in class.
Hmm. Hmm.
But she was the one who would go, right? And meet with the teachers if there were any issues or anything like that. Parent teacher conferences. She was the one who went. And then she would report back to my parents. And then they would handle the discipline part of it, right? So that's how that worked when I was growing up in St. Vincent.
Yeah.
Here, on the other hand, I play a very active role in my daughter's education. Play a very active role in that from the beginning, from when she, went through from pre-K 4 all the way up to now. Not as much now, but definitely when she was in elementary school, I would definitely be heavily involved in her education. As far as advocating, the way that I did it was similar to what Corinne did. If I didn't agree with something, I would make it plain. And if I saw that there were ways that they were, she was having issues at school with some subject or whatever it was, I would advocate on her behalf when she was younger. And what I will interject and say here is that a lot of the help with my advocacy came from these two ladies and one other person. And we share a very close relationship. So we talk
Mm.
every day. And, I definitely rely on them for their wise counsel and, talking through things and how to approach certain things as far as it goes with education. So that's my experience up to
Mm.
now.
For me, it is also very different. And when I was in primary school, my mom was very involved in PTA meetings because it was easy. I'm from the countryside in St. Vincent,
Hmm.
and that was a bit tricky because I went to girls' high school and parent teachers meetings would be later in the evening, and that was a challenge for my mom. Um, so she wasn't very involved then. I made it my business to be very involved here with my daughter because
Hmm.
I realized that if you're not involved, if they see that you're not around, they tend to treat your child differently. But
True.
when you're heavily involved, they realize that you have representation. And
Hmm.
because of that, they seem to be a bit more, I don't, for lack of a better term, maybe more, pay more attention to that child as opposed to the child that doesn't have representation. In terms of advocacy, I'm big on that. I've always taught my daughter from day one, advocate for yourself, advocate for yourself. Stand up for yourself, be firm without being rude. And she has always stood up for herself. And whenever, let's say, for example, a teacher were to call me or text me and said, your daughter did this or your daughter did that, I know my daughter. And I know the child that I raised, and I know the values that I instilled in my child. And I can stand in front of anyone at that point that I would let them know that does not sound like my child, and I'm sorry, but my child is telling me the truth. And I know this can be a little touchy, and some people say, oh,
Mhm.
well, you think that you know your child better than anybody else, but I do know my child better than anyone else would. And a lot of times it's because they are around other people. Sometimes you're just caught up, wrong place at the wrong time. But I know the things that my child would do. And I always told her, stand up for yourself. If you know you were not involved in whatever occurred, you let them know that you weren't there. Let them know
Hmm.
that that was not you. You just happened to be in the vicinity when that happened, when that was going down, but you were not part of that. And to this day, she is her biggest advocate. And it got to the point where she would even advocate for others because she became so good at that that she, like other people leaned on her for things like that.
So I love that. So what this brings me to, and this is a really interesting thing, right? So Michelle, you kicked us off where with the little wrinkle that I put into the question about parental involvement back in
Mhm.
St. Vincent. And I feel like when I went to school in St. Vincent, I went to school in St. Vincent until I was in junior four, right? When I was 10 years old, then I left. And I know like the school pretty much has like autonomy over all learning. It's like just drop your kid off and we got it from here, right? That's kind of how I
Right.
remember going to school. So parents
Yeah,
weren't as involved, like, like even me with
definitely
my
not.
kids going to parent, like I'm way more involved here. But I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
understand, like, from coming from a culture where I'm not going to say the parents were hands off, but coming from a culture where sort of education was revered at a certain level, where people just entrusted their child with the educators. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what was the thing when you guys came to America that made you be so vigilant about, being so more involved than the culture that you came from?
For me, I think it was just a fact of wanting to do something different, right?
Mm,
And I think in St. Vincent or in the Caribbean on a whole, I don't think we kind of grow up in a way where we see it. But back in those days, I think it's probably different now. But back
hmm.
in those days, you couldn't question the authority really of the educators, right? What they
Hmm.
said was the law.
That was
So
it.
so
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, so nobody really questioned them. Generally, no one questioned, right? There were some anomalies, but generally
Right.
nobody would question the
Some
authority,
aberrations.
or the parents would not question the authority of the educators. So I think seeing that, and I think having gone through a little bit of my education here in college and seeing how people were, standing up for themselves, and we weren't really taught to really, you need to be quiet, and you weren't encouraged to speak up. And then when you get here, and then everybody's like, challenging the teachers, and it's like, whoa, what's that? Okay,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
Hmm.
very different, right? So I think that kind of gave me the assurance that this is something that I should probably be doing for my daughter, advocating
Hmm.
for, speaking up and saying, on her behalf here, because
Yeah.
I think it is just more acceptable.
Absolutely. And so I think that's a valid point, right? Like for any parent coming into the system, you have to be involved, right?
Mhm.
Because again, the school system, it's some of these schools are huge, right? Some of these schools have
Yeah.
1,000 kids in there, right? So you as a parent, you have to, and you may not know anyone, right? You're bringing your kid to a brand new school. It's not like when we grew up where, You kind of knew everyone in the
Right.
school. You knew all the
Mm-hmm.
families. It's, it's a much smaller environment that we're coming from versus coming here. So, Corinne, this question is for you. Since you have successfully navigated multiple children through the system, right? What are some things you learned along the way? You know what I mean? From the first child to the last child that you're like, okay, I need to make sure that I improve this. I need to adjust to this. What are some things that you had to, I mean, you had to learn with the first child, but as you went through and got them all through the K through 12 system, what are some of the adjustments you made, from child to child?
I want to piggyback on what Michelle just said in terms of the involvement.
Mm-hmm.
My parents and extended family were embarrassingly involved. So it was actually an embarrassment. So I used to try to a certain extent as they got older to not be as hands-on, at least not upfront hands-on. I would attend school events, attend PTCs and stuff, but I remember that's why, based on the embarrassment I felt, which was all love, and it
Mm-hmm.
all worked out, and it was really, really, in the moment it's embarrassing, but as an adult, you look back, hindsight is 2020. They were
And you're
there. They
grateful for the
showed up.
things that they did. Yes.
Yes. No, they
Yes.
showed up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They showed up and showed out every time. I
Yeah.
remember even, I won't even get specific, but they showed up and showed out, and they were challenged.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I learned from their example how to challenge. I learned from their example how to not accept just what, and then you see they were all educators as well.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
I learned how to just not accept nonsense, or how to not just accept what the teacher said or accept what they said as law. So even when I came here, even though I may have been quieter than a student who would have navigated this system personally, I was not necessarily as quiet or as accepting of the status quo as some other kids that I know who came from the same environment I came from.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of learning throughout the years from 1 to 2 to 3 children, but I was very hands-on and I was in the trenches. So I knew how to box, I knew how to sling mud. By the
Mm-hmm.
time I got to the second, well, that's my oldest. By the time I got to the second one, same thing, but I was able to let go a little earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the last one, even earlier. But I
Mm-hmm.
always made sure that when I let go, they had the reins. So you
Yeah.
know that you are in charge. So at some
Mm-hmm.
point, you have to take personal responsibility for where you are going with your life educationally. You know, you're not
Yeah.
always going to make perfect decisions. They haven't always done that, but sometimes you learn from error.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the and that's another thing about the system here that was new to me. The understanding that kids can learn from challenges and learn from having things wrong. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't learn like that. You had to
Mm-hmm.
have it right.
Everything
Mm-hmm.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Here, they allow you to make mistakes so that you can learn from them, navigate your mistakes. So that's
Mm-hmm.
where I think that that's one advantage a lot of kids have here,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what gives them the impetus to maybe speak up for themselves and advocate for themselves, because
Right.
this challenged me, so I'm gonna do something about it.
Right.
you
Right.
know
Right. Yeah.
yeah, so I did learn to let go a little sooner,
Yeah.
as the
So,
Each
time
child.
progressed.
so what
Okay.
you're saying is that it's not as punitive as it would be in St. Vincent, and the fear of retribution is, can be lethal in a much smaller environment.
Yeah, in a
Am
sense,
I
but I
putting
don't
words
think,
in your
you see,
mouth?
then my experience was different because they didn't
Yeah.
have no fair retribution.
Yeah. Yeah. But you had an army coming to the school, so that's very different
Yeah,
versus for a
then
child who didn't have the same level of advocacy,
right,
then you just
right.
have to zip it and just take what you
Yeah,
get.
and take it.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool, and just move on and say accept.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of piggyback off what Karen was just saying. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I allowed my daughter to do, which we weren't quite allowed to make our own choices where education was concerned when you got to Form 3 and you had to decide what path you were going to take. Are you going to do science or are you going to do business?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's like the parents choosing for the children as if they're the ones that are going to live the life going forward. They're a lot of times they live vicariously through the children. I didn't do this, so I want to make sure my child did that. One of the things that I did was I gave my child full autonomy. when it was time to go to high school, she passed for a specialty high school. We went to the opening. We weren't impressed. I think noteworthy here, my daughter went to a charter school she was in the charter school system. She started out in private school. She went to public school for a very short stint, didn't like it, and then she went to charter school. And I mentioned this to say they are three totally different entities, like totally different. The experiences were totally different. My daughter wanted to stay in the charter school system when it was time to go to high school. And I told her, I didn't ask for a lot. I said, bring home an average of 85. I wasn't even asking for a lot. And I'll let you stay. Otherwise, when it comes time for grade 10, you are gonna go to that specialty school. That's it. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. So she went to school. I said, and as a matter of fact, one of the things I did, I said, give me 3 reasons why I should let you go to go to the charter high school instead of the specialty school. And she was always very articulate. She was very critical in her thinking, and she laid out 3 things to me, and I said, okay, well, this seems fair. I'm gonna allow you to do this. And from the time she started high school up until she left high school, she was a high honor student. So she didn't only bring home an 85 for me, she exceeded that. And I am happy that I gave her that autonomy. And it's always within reason. Don't get me wrong. Like the final say is going to be mine, but I want you to make your own mistakes because this is your life. And when you make these mistakes, you're not going to say, well, mom told me to do this.
Right.
These were my decisions. I'm giving you an opportunity to make your decisions. Think about what you're doing, choose wisely, because this is going to be a path ahead going forward. I feel like we didn't really have much of that back home. It was more of what mommy said and what daddy said, because mommy going to pay for the subjects and daddy going to pay for the subjects, and you're going to do what I want you to do.
And
you know,
let me
go
just say
ahead.
something quickly there. I think a lot of that is that in addition to, if you were seen as being very bright, right? They would naturally put you into the sciences, right? And for those who are not as bright, then you get to go into, maybe languages or something else, business or something else. Understand, right? The smarter students are put into the science subjects, whether that was their inclination or not, right? There was no thought given to maybe this person is just naturally good at doing these subjects, or they just, whatever it is. But they might have an interest in business, or they might have an interest in the languages or whatever it is.
Exactly.
That's a lot of what was happening, I think, back in our day. And that's why some kids, some of our classmates were put in those classes.
This is also what happens when you find a lot of people go to college and they're doing what do you call it, degrees that when they go into the work field has absolutely nothing to do with what they went to school for. Because a lot of times their parents want to live vicariously through them. They're forcing them to go one way when that's not really what they want to do.
Kelon, you're speaking my language. So piggybacking on what you said, right? In the Caribbean, sometimes everybody's kind of categorized based on how you do into these few different subjects and these few different pathways that they're going to pipeline to, based on kind of historical, just history. Just this is what we've always done, so this is what we're doing.
Right.
What I'm hearing from the 3 of you is you're talking about how, you're raising children here. The kids have options. You're exposing them to options. Kelon, you talked about your kids going to public, charter, and private school. Your daughter was able to experience, 3 different, pretty much the 3 main school systems in any major city in America, right? It's private, public, and charter, right? And your daughter was able to experience those and kind of find her way, figure out what's the best fit for her. You gave her enough autonomy to kind of make, with some parameters and with some guardrails to make that decision, right? So this is my question for the 3 of you. So with a plethora of options available to the kids, right? Give us some tips on how you help to expose and nurture your child or your children to a lot of these different options that are available to them in America and within the education school system, and specifically within the schools that they attended, right? So that could be clubs, that could be field trips, specialty, whatever. Like what did you do intentionally to kind of expose them to like broaden their horizons so that they can start to understand different pathways and different options that are available to them? What are some things that you guys did?
For me, I started exposing my daughter to, different things. So like dance, we did dance for a bit, we did
Mm-hmm.
jujitsu for a bit. She being exposed to the Caribbean culture, she had an interest in learning to play the steel pan, so we did that for a bit. So we've been all over the place. Initially, when she was like in middle school, I didn't see. I mean, that's kind of young, but I didn't really see that she had an affinity for any one particular thing. But I felt as if I should expose her to music or to playing
Mm-hmm.
an instrument because that's a good skill to have. So I exposed her to that through the school music program. Initially, she wanted to stop, and then I kind of encouraged her a bit more. And I'm happy that I did because now she's in high school, she is in the band, and she loves learning to play different instruments, right? So things like that. I expose her to different cultural events, whether it's plays at the Kennedy Center. We go to different restaurants and eat foods from different cultures. So she has a wide appreciation for things like that. So those are the
Nice.
kind of things that I try to do.
Based on what we were talking about, yes, I agree that we were streamlined. And even if
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to say necessarily that we were streamed. The smart
Absolutely.
kids were taught even to they were Pavloved into thinking that if you're intelligent, you should do science, even if you
Mm-hmm.
hated science,
Right.
Mhm.
right? And then you were taught that if a kid wanted to do food and nutrition, they were slow.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Pavlov.
Mm-hmm.
So ring a bell and then you believe, oh yeah, because they're doing food and nutrition, something's wrong with them. And that's an ignorant way to think, I'm sorry to say, even with my
Mm-hmm.
culture,
Yeah.
right? Here, our kids have had the opportunity to explore different things.
Mm-hmm.
For me, similar to Michelle, I've exposed them to different activities. Some stuck, some didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I appreciated the contrast where they have had free will to a certain extent, to explore their interests here. And maybe it is because there are more opportunities, or maybe because it's a more open-minded environment, quote unquote, open-minded in certain ways, open-minded academically, not necessarily in other ways. Um, Open-minded society academically, so that they were able to see, they didn't have to do one single stream. You didn't have to
Mm-hmm.
stick to science. You didn't have to stick to business. You didn't have to stick to arts. You didn't have to stick to science. I think I said that science already, but you know what I mean. So having them, for example, the school that one of them went to, two of them went to, there was, as you know, Derek, an associate's program. One of them took advantage of it. One of them had the grades and decided not to. She decided that she wanted to experience high school as a high schooler, not as a college student.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave her the autonomy to choose that.
Mm-hmm.
Had it been in St. Vincent, I might have said, no, you have to go and do the
Have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right. So first one, she decided to do the associates program. It gave us a little leeway in terms of college. Second one decided not to do it, and she still got two full rides to school to go to
Mm-hmm.
college.
Mm-hmm.
And she has opportunities to explore the world. She has been to Chile. She has been to Central America. She has
Mm-hmm.
been to actually South America twice, Chile and
Mm-hmm.
Peru,
Mm-hmm.
and done internships in different parts of the world. And that's because she was able to navigate these paths for herself, things
Mm-hmm.
that we weren't able to do. My oldest one was able to go to Senegal. She was able to go to, just based on
Italy.
language, to Italy.
Mhm.
Yeah. So they've had the opportunities to choose. And I didn't say you have to go to Italy, or I didn't say
Mm-hmm.
you have to go to Senegal. These are things they found for themselves based on the latitude of the latitude of opportunities that were there for them to pick from.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, the youngest one
Yeah.
hasn't had as many opportunities as that because there was COVID during her
Mm-hmm.
time trying to exit high school or get into high school, I should say. So it
Yeah.
was different. It has been different in that respect and more mind opening, more mind it creates more of an awareness and lets them then know what they may want to do in life. Because like for the middle one, she's pretty much fluent in Spanish based on her experiences. And it's not from sitting in a classroom reading a book or looking at videos. It's from conversation with people in real life, giving injections. Imagine that. Giving injections to kids in a mountain in Peru, you know, and teaching them English and formulating a whole program for how to teach kids English. When we were 17, 18, 19, we didn't know that we could do things like that, you know.
Yeah,
No.
absolutely.
It was more of a aquatic club and hanging.
And them doing aquatic club too, yes. But they also know that. We didn't know that. We just wanted a job. We had a worker bee mentality, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that is true. But you know, the one thing that I want to point, not to cut you off quick, but the one thing I wanted to point out here as well is I had a conversation similar to this with my sister some weeks ago. And one of the things that she pointed out was that in St. Vincent, back in our days, there was really no opportunity to have any after school activities, right? Except if you were going to like guides or brownies or something like that. Typically, everything had to be done by the time your parents were leaving Kingstown to go home. Because they were not coming back into town to pick you up after piano or anything else like that, generally. Right? Most things had to finish by the time government workers or wherever they were working, they finish, they're going home. Parents were not going to bring you back into town or wherever on a Saturday to go play tennis and whatever other activities that you could have involved yourself in. That was just not happening, right? You get what you get at school and you keep it moving. But it's a different thing here, right? We dedicate our weekends or after work and we're all over the place making sure children get exposure.
You finish up. Kaylon, tell us, jump in.
So it started out, one of the things that I liked is you going into a private school setting because she started. So my daughter, let me give you a little backstory. My daughter was reading when she was 2 years old. I had the opportunity to be at home with her when she was younger, and I did a bit of homeschooling. So by the time she started school, she was reading. So I started her at a private school, and one of the things that they were able to do was to skip her. So she never did pre-K. She started at kindergarten. She did a gifted and talented test and scored in the 99th percentile. This created a challenge because now she's going into the public school system, even though it is in the gifted and talented program. They wanted to put her a grade back. So this created a challenge. And my thing is, you are not putting my child one grade back. She's already done that. And the thing about the private school that she went to, they were actually teaching a grade ahead. So technically, my daughter was performing at, let's say, a second grade level going into first grade. And they didn't want to do that. And we fought and fought. And I said, well, it's not happening. Eventually, they ended up putting her in first grade. And they said, well, we'll put her there for a week or two and see how she performs. Oh, she's too young. She's not going to be matured enough. Newsflash, every single class that my daughter has been in, she's been the youngest. And every single parent-teachers conference, I've been told that she's the most matured in the class. So I had that challenge. We overcame that. She didn't want to go again because it was a very long travel for her, meant waking up 5 o'clock in the morning at 5 years old. That's very hard. And then she's doing after school until I'm done with work. So I like the fact that private school allowed her to be placed where she should be at the time when she started. Fast forward to charter school. The charter school system opened a lot of doors for her, like a lot of doors. Like she traveled. Every end of year they were going somewhere else. She's been to the Golden Gate. She's been, like, you name it. They've done it all. They've done a lot of things, and they get a lot of sponsorship because they are getting grants from the government, and then they're getting sponsorship. So they had the funds available to do these things. So my daughter was exposed to a lot in charter school. And then when it was time to go into college, they had a college prep program where they prepared them. I was very hands off with my
Mm-hmm.
daughter's college selection. Like
Mm-hmm.
my daughter and her college prep advisor did everything together.
Mm-hmm.
Like they paid for all the fees and everything that had to be paid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Everything that she did, like her early admissions, everything, they took care of that. So the charter
Mm-hmm.
school was instrumental in really preparing them for college. And
Mm-hmm.
they also have it's called like high school and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
So she was just telling me that they paid for her textbooks because they have a program that if you would like them to pay for your textbooks, they send out an email, and she just got two of her textbooks paid for through the charter school system. So,
Right.
things like this, a lot of people have negative things to say about the charter school system, but if I had to do it all over again, I will
Mm-hmm.
100% send my child to a charter school.
That's a resounding endorsement for charter schools.
Yes,
I think what's really cool from what the three of you have said is your kids have done really, really well academically, and a lot of that is due to your advocacy, right? And a lot of it is also just due to you intentionally, deliberately being on top of things, but also being flexible, right? Allowing your child
yes,
to move from school to school, explore different programs, giving them the type of patience that they need, the type of leeway that they need to explore, grow while you're nurturing them along the way. I can't help but think, Kaylon, when you talk about your daughter and how she's been able, number one, she was super prepared to enter into the school system at 2 years old reading, right? But then you're
yes,
also able to like be very attentive to continue to nurture her along that trajectory that you started, right? And it sounds like she was really never a problem. And the better you do, and the schools actually are looking for kids who do well, because then that kid ends up being like the poster child for the school, and that happens a lot of times in charter schools. So I'm sure your daughter was one of those
yes,
students. I'm speculating. I
yes.
don't know.
Her picture now. Her picture is up in the hallways.
And that's where I was going, right? So anytime funders
Yes,
come or anybody comes, they go and get your daughter. Hey, come talk to these people
yes,
so they can give us some
yes,
money, right?
yeah. And actually,
Um,
yes, whenever she
yeah,
comes home, she goes and she visits, and they have her talk to like the other students and stuff.
yeah,
Or go back to the middle school, which is the school just because it's the same, it was a continued same umbrella. So
yeah.
they would have her go to the middle school and kind of talk to the other students there to try to get them into
Yeah.
the high school. Yeah. And
It's a
I
it's a
think
it's a blueprint. It's a blueprint for a poster child that ends up being perfect, marketing for any school.
right, right, right. And one thing that I must say,
Hmm.
I was very mindful with going back to school and letting her see how important education was.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
always said I want to be my child's role model. I don't want my
Mm.
child looking out there for anybody else to be a role model. So I
Right.
went back to school. She saw me staying up late at night doing my assignments and
Hmm.
everything.
Yeah.
And it's funny. So she did the running joke with her is, Mom, why do you have to have so many degrees? Every time I'm filling out a form, I have to write all of these degrees. And I'm like, well,
Yeah. It's what mom
yes,
does.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So listen, we're gonna get ready to wrap this up, right? So what I would like for you guys to do is, for you ladies to do is kind of go around and just really like give like the best tips, right, that you've learned along the way that you would have told yourself at the beginning, right? So in the lessons that you've learned in terms of being the best parent that you want to be, coming from St. Vincent, coming to America, learning the system, what are some of the top tips that you learned that if you had to speak to yourself before you became a mom in preparation to be a mom in this system, what would those things be that you would tell yourself?
Advocate for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Do not be scared to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way to do it. You can be firm without being rude. You have a voice. We all have voices, and we should be able to express ourselves in a manner that is acceptable. And yeah, that's basically one of the things. Oh, and always, always listen to your children.
Mm-hmm.
Do not ever think that, oh, they're just going through it. No, mental health
Mm-hmm.
is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to your child, support your
Mm-hmm.
child, be there for your child when your child needs you. Do not
Mm-hmm.
just brush it off, because a lot of times back home, that's what they'll do. Oh, you're just rude. Oh, you no, 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 no.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to your child. Pay attention to the signs, because a
Mm.
lot of things can be avoided if we would only take the time to listen to our children.
Yes.
Amen.
If I were to tell my 26, 27, 30-year-old self something, I would tell them, be less apprehensive and teach your child as a student to be able to analyze and trust the system so that you could trust their decisions earlier. You know, let them give them the tools, of course, to advocate for themselves, but also give them the tools to be able to discern for themselves, be able to determine for themselves what opportunities best suit them and which ones don't. And if they do not take the ones that do suit them according to your assessment in the moment, give them the opportunities to reassess, reevaluate, and retry. You
Mm.
know, let them understand that from early that failure is not an ending. Failure is a lesson learned.
Mm.
And you can fail as many times as you want to. Just continue to learn the lessons that come from the failure. And
Mm.
don't stop or get scared or apprehensive because of it. I think we were taught to think like that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
and and also to not think that one stumbling block or one thing that not necessarily you due to your any fault of your own, anything that happens that did not happen in accordance with your projections or your trajectory or what you expected to
Timeline.
happen.
Mhm.
That's
Timeline.
what
Mm.
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
timeline, your whatever events.
Get rid of
Don't
the
think that,
timelines. Yeah.
yeah. Organize yourself. Organize yourself
Yes.
Yes.
based on where you are. Look forward based on where you are, and don't think that because you're not doing X at this time or not doing Y this way, this specific way, that you're doing it
Mhm.
wrong. Recognize that there are many different ways to skin a cat and
Amen.
continue pressing forward.
So these two ladies have said a lot of what I would have said to myself. Um, what I would have told my younger self is probably relax a little bit, chill out a little bit.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be so hyper focused on making sure that you meet these benchmarks, or you meet whatever thing you make up in your mind is what needs to be done at this point in time,
Mhm.
right? um and just understanding, looking at your child and understanding, paying close attention to see where their passions lie, and try to guide them in that way, or try to give them the opportunity to see if that's really something that they want to do. um, and understanding that those things can change from time to time. You might be interested in music this time, you might be interested in science next year. If you hate science, like right now with my daughter, absolutely hates chemistry. She may be a
Mhm.
doctor, you never know,
Yeah.
right? The other thing that I probably would say is to understand that, especially when kids get to high school, they have so much pressure on them to excel and to do this and to do that. Just understand that high school or any point in time, that's just a small portion of your life. It doesn't dictate where you go
Mhm.
at the end of it.
Can you all speak a little bit about along the way with these experiences, right? You're essentially guiding a child from, let's say preschool all the way through the system, right? So who are some of the people who've helped you along the way, especially to get you acclimated to how things are done in America, whether it's a family member, a neighbor, a teacher at school? Who are some of those people that you all want to shout out to say, hey, this person was really instrumental in helping me to best or better navigate the American education system? Who are some of those people?
I want to go first here because I want to shout out these two ladies that are on the call with me. As I
Mm,
told you, we have a very strong group, right? We've known each other since like
Years, for a few years,
years,
since we
many,
started
many
high school.
years, umpteen
Yeah.
years ago, as people say in the Caribbean, umpteen years ago, right?
Since
mhm,
1986 at least.
There you go. And there's one
Yes.
other person who's missing from the conversation today who is also a part of a very, very tight village. We have a very
mhm,
tight village, and they tell you
Yes.
like it is. For me, I was very confused with a lot of things. My daughter went from pre-K up to now. She's in 10th grade in the private school system. There's a lot of
mhm,
things that I didn't know about, how things happen in schools in America. And these ladies were very instrumental in helping me and continue to be helping me to navigate the system. In addition to the fact that when my daughter was in the pre-K through middle school part of her life, I had a cousin who was at the school, who taught at the school that she went to. So she kind of helped me in that way.
There was a teacher at Howard, Dr. V. He was pivotal in the choices that were made, especially for high school. You, Derek, you're another one because you give very good advice and you give sound advice, whether you realize it or not.
Oh, thank
Michelle,
you.
Let me
yeah, man.
yes, I agree with that. My
Yeah.
one session I had with her was instrumental. So yes, anyway.
Yeah, man. Derek knows what he's doing.
Thank
Kaylon
y'all.
too. And even
Thank you.
even like I also want to shout out Google. You
YouTube.
know, a lot of the stuff, even though I don't really necessarily agree with a lot of things, but a lot of the stuff that I've learned in terms of navigating the system and figuring out, because so you have to figure out certain loopholes sometimes. I learned it from Google. Kaylon talks about getting her child into school earlier. I was able to do that because I got one into school later, and I was upset about that. So I figured out how to navigate the system and get her into school a year ahead of time. Right? Different things. Learn trial and error. Just trial and error. And I just want to shout out trial and error, my friends and my family circle.
Yeah. That's what's up. Bring us home, Kaylon.
So for me, I really didn't have anybody in the beginning stages, but I made it my business to ensure that my daughter was going to have the best education that she could have. And I was setting her up. My thing was to make sure, and it's funny, we were talking about benchmarks and stuff before. I wanted to make sure that she would go to one of the best colleges because I wanted to make sure that she was going to be set for life, right? Later on, when I reconnected with the ladies in the village, Corinne and Michelle and the other Corinne, and we all got together, we actually shared a lot in that group. And especially when it was time for my daughter to go to college, Corinne was very instrumental, like I would reach out to her and ask her, for advice and stuff like that, because she had already had two daughters that had already started college. And she was very instrumental, and we shared everything, every acceptance letter I got was put into that group and, things like that. And we supported each other. When I tell you one of the best things that has happened to me is this group. Like we put everything the funny thing, the irony is that we all have girls here, right? So it's almost
That was by
there's
design,
like
by the
this.
way. That's by design. This is
Yeah,
keeping the Vincy Mom
yeah,
Roundtable theme.
right. So there's
You're welcome.
something. There's just something about this group of ladies that I appreciate so much because they really have helped me navigating the latter part, which is the college part of my daughter's journey. But yeah, and then like Corinne said, doing a lot of research, I was hell bent on making sure that she got the best, and yeah, trial and error.
Yeah,
Doesn't come with a manual, just like parenting. You try it, it works. You do something else if that doesn't work.
For me, the importance here, the thing that I really appreciate is the friendship that y'all have, the peer group, the strong village that y'all have created, because I think that is what enables all your kids to flourish, right?
Yeah.
So it's a village mentality, and there's enough for everybody. It's an abundant mentality, right? So it's
Yeah.
like we all pool our resources together, we share, we lean on each other, we hold each other accountable, we support each other. And I think that's really the key. Like if you come here and you try to, especially in America, if you try to do anything alone in America, it's going to be really, really difficult. You know what I mean? Like you need a team, right? You need a good peer group, you need coaches, you need mentors, you need sponsors, you need a lot. So you have to really cultivate those relationships, those friendships, and give. I think the best part about that is that y'all give to each other, right? You give support, you give information, you give love. So it's really give, ask, right? As Gary Vee likes to say. Don't just come asking for stuff and then you don't share anything. Y'all are very very helpful, extremely giving. I asked y'all to do this and y'all were happy to do it, and this is really just the tip of the iceberg because with everybody's story, we can delve in so much deeper into all the things. We didn't really talk about SATs and preparing for SATs, and we didn't, there's a lot of stuff that we didn't talk about. Different schools may have, different,
Navigating, even
yeah.
something navigating, what do you call it? The 2020 with the coronavirus and the lockdown when the kids,
Yeah, absolutely.
that will be a very interesting topic
Oh
because
yeah.
Yeah.
I know, like,
Longitudinally.
We need a part two, Derek.
yes,
Absolutely, absolutely. This is just the
definitely.
beginning. Yeah, I think this
Yes.
is
Yeah.
gonna be like
Oh,
a
I
monthly
think
segment on the show because ideally we want to have even more interaction. So I really appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. Any final words before we
Yeah.
depart?
Yeah. Thank you. By the way, thank you for doing this. I think that this is going to be helpful. And my goal in life is if I can just reach one person and just help one person, then it's worth doing what you're doing. And I know with you doing this, you're going to reach somebody. There's somebody out there who needs to hear this. There's somebody who's going to be happy that somebody is doing the groundwork for them and putting this out there so that they know when they come here and they're put in this position, they know how to navigate, or they can reach out. Another thing that we can do is, give them resources,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
things like that.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that there's somebody out there that's going to be very happy that we're doing this so that they can learn something from this.
Absolutely. And this is the spirit of giving. This is the whole idea behind this. Is for us to share these stories. Because as you ladies I came here in 1985 at 10 years old, right? So I've been here 40 years. So my experience is very different than your experience, right? So
Yeah,
I came here, I started off in the sixth grade. So I got a little bit of elementary school, middle school, high school. So then when I became a parent, I had my first 10 years in St. Vincent. Then after that, so I could draw on both of those experiences, right?
right,
Especially to prepare for an American system that I myself actually experienced. Whereas y'all came with, the Vincy, education fully entrenched, but then you were able to come here, go to college, um, then have your kids go through the system. So either way, it's really about taking advantage of your opportunities, taking advantage of your experiences, and just leveraging, those opportunities the best you can. I think the three of you are great examples of that. So I appreciate you, and thank you so much for being guests on the show.
Thank you.
thank
thank you for
Thanks for
you.
having
having
us.
us.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
so
having us.
much.
Great
Yes,
show. Thank you.
yes.
Absolutely.